Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. And man, this is one of those ones that took a while to put together. I've been doing this like all day. I got an email from Jim Van Sickle. Subject line: 99 years ago today, a total solar eclipse split a major U.S. city, and history will repeat itself in 75 days. So this is obvious reference to this upcoming eclipse on April 8th. 2024, the day after conference. So I wanted to look into this further. Immediately, 99 years ago, stuck out to me because what else happened 99 years ago? President Nelson was born. So in the body of the email, he leaves the link for the Forbes article. It says, "Hi, Jared. I just came across this article and thought I'd share it with you. It was an interesting read for sure. Thanks for all your work and effort to keep us posted on this on signs in our times." Well, thank you, Jim, for sending this to me. Basically prompted me to do something that I think I've been needing to do. I just never thought to do it until now. So we're going to go over the article, right? And I'm going to give you a preview of what we're going to be going over in this video. This prompted me to take all 7 headquarters of the church. And by the way, I didn't know that there were 7 headquarters of the church. Okay. For example, the first headquarters, and this is according to this church, this article. This is in the August 2001 Ensign, from New York to Utah, 7 church headquarters. So I took those 7 church headquarters and took other, what I feel are significant cities, and figured out when they would experience either total eclipses or annular eclipses. And the cities that I have, and this is from west to east: St. George, Salt Lake, Winter Quarters, Independence, far west, Adamond-Yaman, Nauvoo, Kirtland, Hiram, Ohio, Palmyra, Washington, D.C., Fayette, New York City, Rome, Jerusalem. So this includes all 7 headquarters of the church, as well as other significant sites. And I put on here on a timeline all these cities and when they're going to experience either one of those 2 types of eclipses. And I'm glad that I did, because there's some pretty interesting insights that I gained from this. So let's go to the Forbes article and let's read it. In 75 days, a total solar eclipse will come to North America, throwing part of 15 U.S. states into a rare darkness during the day, alongside parts of Mexico and Canada. It's happened before, most recently on August 21st, 2017, but 99 years ago today, on January 24th, 1925, a landmark total solar eclipse came across the U.S. Northeast that divided one of the biggest cities in the world into the eclipse haves and have-nots. So this is already, that's kind of interesting. I don't necessarily, place any specific interpretation of that. It's just interesting that, and they're talking about New York City, that New York City got split into 2 because of this eclipse back in 1925. So make of that what you will, but continuing, that day, totality struck just after sunrise, as seen from parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. The city of New Haven, Connecticut saw totality for the longest, at 2 minutes, but this eclipse was most famous for what happened in Manhattan in New York City. Okay, here's like an old picture of it. This is on the Great American Eclipse X account, right? They have this old diagram right here. Okay, continuing on. So I guess a lot of people were expecting this, but they miscalculated the path. And it says here, that boundary had been predicted to be 83rd Street, cutting Manhattan in 2. In the event, 96th Street proved to be the boundary, and the eclipse came 4 seconds late. So I guess that, you know, I don't know. They don't really elaborate on what happened, but I guess there were probably some disappointed people if they were just like at that edge and then they didn't get the full effect. But anyway, just a couple more things. History repeated. Some cities, some cities that last experienced totality in 1925 will do so again in just 75 days. One of them is Rochester, New York. Now, this caught my attention because that's close to Palmyra, the site of the near the site of the Sacred Grove, right? And what do we know about this upcoming eclipse on April 8th? It's going to go over the Sacred Grove. So we're talking about an eclipse in 1925, okay, the year after President Nelson was born. In fact, this was just a few months later because President Nelson was born September 9th of 1924. And so just 4 months later, you had this eclipse that went over the Sacred Grove. So, and now we have this one that's coming up where now he's president of the church, and he's going to be in his 7th year. He'll have completed 6 years. Actually, he already has. He completed 6 years on the 14th of January. So right now, he is now working on he's entered into his 7th year as president of the church. And he's currently 99 years old. He'll turn 100 years old on September 9th of this year. So it's a really interesting time. And it seems like this is another bookend. Only it's not a bookend of his presidency. You might remember, I'm sure you've seen it if you've been watching my recent videos. There's a whole bunch of bookends. Not to say that his presidency has come to an end, but again, he's 99 years old, which means that he's in his 100th year of life, and he's been speaking less and less in General Conference. He's had some health issues. Now, he could still last a while. I don't know. But he talks about the second coming a lot. It seems like 2024 is a special year because this is the year that the Sali Temple was supposed to be rededicated. And again, we have this eclipse that's happening right after General Conference. And there's just a lot of things that seem to be pointing to this year. In fact, okay, let's just do it. Oh, by the way, here's the Flood the Earth challenge. I haven't updated it because it took me all this time to put this spreadsheet together. But the last I updated it, we have 2 new people that are meeting with the missionaries, and that brings us to a total of 114. And we have a total of 8,034 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared so far. So keep up the good work, everybody. Okay, so like I mentioned, we are now in his 7th year as president of the church. Let me zoom in a little bit. Let's go to 200. 7th year as president of the church. He is in his 100th year of life, being 99 years old. He's in his 99th year. He's given 40 talks as president of the church, if you don't count the Hosanna Shout instructions in April 2020. As an apostle, he's given 111 talks. Both interesting numbers. Also, April 7th will be his 40-year anniversary, meaning that he's completed 40 years as an apostle, which just happens to be the day before the eclipse. And it'll be on the Sunday of General Conference. It's now 20 years since 2004. That's when President Oaks gave a really interesting Second Coming talk, unlike any other that I've ever seen, where he listed out the signs of the times in a bullet point list. And he said a lot of interesting things. It was a unique talk. And that's the year when you suddenly had a lot of things happening with wildfires and earthquakes. I've covered this before in other videos. I have my spreadsheets, and there's definitely been an increase in wildfires. A lot of records that have been broken since 2004. And then earthquake fatalities have definitely gone up since that time. There's been 2 really major earthquakes that killed a lot of people. The first was in December of 2004, the Indonesia earthquake and tsunami, it was over 200,000 people that died from that. And then in 2010, there was the Haiti earthquake that killed over 200,000 people. And there's also been other notable years, including last year. So 20 years since that time, in April, the April General Conference, it'll be 5 years since President Nelson said time is running out. And then it's 7 years since that last great American eclipse in 2017. So these are a lot of interesting things that are kind of like converging right now. I'm not saying anything's going to happen. I don't know. I'm just taking note. I mean, geez, it's very interesting numbers. Just something to think about. Okay, so lost my train of thought now. Good job, Jared. So anyway, we're talking about, okay, so I wanted to see the path of it was a total solar eclipse. So the one in 1925 that the article was about, that happened 99 years ago, this is the path that it took. Okay, here, now it's not loading. So here's the path. You can see New York City down here. Here's Rochester, New York. And this little place marker right here is Palmyra. Okay, so Palmyra was in the path of totality back when this occurred. It's going to be in the path of totality, the one that's coming up, April 8th. Here's that eclipse. It's going to go over Palmyra. It's also going to go over Kirtland, Ohio, where we have our first temple of this dispensation, where all the different priesthood keys were restored. Christ appeared. And just the fact that it was the first temple since, I suppose, probably the Nephite temples. So it's been a long time since we've had any temples, but that was the first one in a long time. Okay. And then it turns out that there was another one. Okay. At first I was just looking at Palmyra, and there was another eclipse. It wasn't a total solar eclipse. It was an annular solar eclipse. So an annular solar eclipse occurs when in its orbit around the Earth, the moon is the furthest from the Earth. And so when an eclipse happens under those conditions, the sun isn't like totally blocked out or blocked by the moon. And so you have like a ring of fire that goes around it. And you don't really get the full effect that you would with the total eclipse as far as like the shadow goes. But it does like get darker, but it's just not as intense as a total solar eclipse. So you have this path. In the case of an annular solar eclipse, it's called the path of annularity. And this happened May 10th of 1994. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to I figured, you go here to timeanddate.com and you go to sun, moon, and space, go down to eclipses, and then there's a search bar right here, search for city or place. And you can search any location, and then it'll show you all the different eclipses and, all the eclipses that are taking place for that area and on what date. And the time range goes from the year 1900 all the way down to 2199. And so what I did is I went one by one and did it for all those different cities that I mentioned earlier. And that's what took so long. But again, it was well worth it. And I'm going to show you some interesting things. So first, let's talk about President Nelson. Okay, so this eclipse in 1925 took place just 4 months after he was born. He is now 99 years old, and for the first time in 99 years, this same place, Palmyra, the Sacred Grove, is going to see another eclipse again, just like it did back in like a total solar eclipse, just like it did back in 1925. And I was thinking about the April 2020 General Conference and how one of the main themes, well, pretty much the main theme of that conference was the 200-year anniversary of the first vision, which took place in the Sacred Grove. And I just want to show you just a little bit. I just wanted to show you a little bit of how much President Nelson highlighted this particular conference and this event. So the very first talk of that conference is called Opening Message. And I just want to read a part of this. He says, "This year, we commemorate the 200th anniversary of one of the most significant events in the history of the world, namely the appearance of God the Father and his beloved Son, Jesus Christ, to Joseph Smith. During that singular vision, God the Father pointed to Jesus Christ and said, 'This is my beloved Son, hear him.'" We're going to skip down just a little bit. "We pray that this conference will be memorable and unforgettable." Now, that's something that he said a couple times before conference, that we should all look forward to this conference because it'll not only be memorable, but it will be unforgettable. And then he says it right here at the beginning of conference. "We pray that this conference will be memorable and unforgettable because of the messages you will hear, the unique announcements which will be made, and the experiences in which you will be invited to participate. For example, at the conclusion of the Sunday morning session, we will convene a worldwide solemn assembly." Now, I've done a video about this. In general conference, the only time that we've had a solemn assembly convened is when the previous president of the church has passed away, and now we're welcoming the one that's taking over, his successor. Okay. This is the only time, aside from that there's been a solemn assembly called for general conference. I've searched it. Yes, we did do a Hosanna shout for the conference center, but when you search that general conference, they did not say that they were calling a solemn assembly. It was not said in any of the talks. Okay. So this sets this general conference apart from all the others because of that. "We will convene a worldwide solemn assembly when I will lead you in the sacred Hosanna shout. We pray that this will be a spiritual highlight for you as we express in global unison our profound gratitude to God the Father and his beloved Son by praising them in this unique way. For the sacred experience, we use clean white handkerchiefs, but if you do not have one, you may simply wave your hand. At the conclusion of the Hosanna shout, the congregation will join with the choir in singing the Spirit of God." My dear brothers and sisters, this conference will be magnificent. This year will be extraordinary as we focus intently on the Savior and his restored gospel. The most important lasting effects on this historic conference will be as our hearts change and we commence a lifelong quest to hear him. Welcome to the April 2020 General Conference. I know that God, our Heavenly Father, and his Son, Jesus Christ, are mindful of us. They will be with us throughout the proceedings of these 2 glorious days as we seek to draw closer to them and honor them. So, there was a big deal made about this conference, and it was commemorating 200 years since the first vision in the Sacred Grove. And it just so happens that 4 months after he was born, after President Nelson was born, there was this total solar eclipse that went over the Sacred Grove. And now, as president of the church, and a day after he reaches his 40th anniversary as an apostle, and in his 7th year as president of the church, there's going to be another eclipse. And that's going to go over the Sacred Grove. That's very unlikely. It is. It's very unlikely. I'll show you. So from here, let's go ahead and go to the spreadsheet. First, I created this one. So let's go back to the very beginning. Now I remind you, these are all the total and annular eclipses for these cities. St. George, Salt Lake, Winter Quarters, Independence, Far West, Adamantiaman, Nauvoo, Kirtland, Hiram, Palmyra, Washington, D.C., Fayette, New York City, Rome, Jerusalem. So already right off the bat, from the year 1900, which is this first row, you see there aren't very many eclipses taking place in these places. In fact, the first one is this eclipse of 1925. That eclipse went over Palmyra, or in other words, the site of the Sacred Grove, Fayette, which was the first church headquarters and where the church was organized, and New York City. And it cut New York City into two pieces. And I don't know, make of that what you will. I think it's interesting. Okay, so you have that. Okay, here's our next one, 1933. And the one in 1933 went over Jerusalem, although it was an annular solar eclipse, not a total solar eclipse. It happened on August 21st. 21 is 3 sevens. And then you'll notice all this white space right here, just nothing happening. From 1934 until 1993, there are no eclipses in any of these locations. There's just a whole bunch of nothing. Okay? 1933 was the last time in Jerusalem. And then the next time that we have an eclipse in any of these locations is in 1994. And you'll see it goes over a number of different locations. It goes over Fayette, New York, the first headquarters of the church. It goes over the Sacred Grove. It goes over Hiram, Ohio, which was the third headquarters of the church, and Kirtland, Ohio, the second headquarters of the church, and the site of the first temple of this dispensation. And it also goes over Independence, Missouri, which will be, whenever the church headquarters are changed and move over there, it's going to be the 8th headquarters of the church. Salt Lake is the 7th. So that's something that I never really thought about until making this video, that Jackson County, Independence, the site of the New Jerusalem, that will be the 8th headquarters of the church, if you're counting from when this dispensation started. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different locations that experience this eclipse. This particular eclipse is a annular eclipse. Okay. But I have that pulled up here just so you can visualize it. Let me zoom out. And there you go. It goes all the way from New York and Ohio over to Missouri. And it's interesting because when you zoom in to the Kansas City area, okay, now this dotted line represents the center of the path of annularity, and this red line is the northern boundary of that. And when you zoom in, Independence, it seems that Independence actually kind of gets, maybe a part of it is not inside this path. I can't tell. I don't know what the city limits are, but whatever the case, Independence, and if you zoom in, you can see the, excuse me, here's the temple lot, here's the visitor center, here's the community of Christ on either side of this intersection. So this was just barely inside the path of annularity in 1994, but it was within it. So that's really interesting. It's really interesting that so many significant church sites can be within the same path of totality. Okay, so let's go back to the spreadsheet and let's continue on. Okay, in 2012, there on May 20th, there was a annular solar eclipse over St. George. I have St. George just because that's the site of like the first, the first continually operating temple to this day, right? Before that time, we had the Kirtland Temple, we had the Nauvoo Temple, we had the cornerstones laid for some additional temples, but this is the oldest operating church or temple in our church is in St. George. So I just thought I would put it on there. Okay, and then that brings us up to 2017. And 2017 went over Adamondayaman. It went over Far West, which was the fourth headquarters of the church. And then Independence, Missouri. And I've shown before that this path, it had to take the exact path that it did in order to encompass these three areas. In fact, no, I don't have it up. Anyway, I've shown it before. Just go to timeanddate.com and you can check it out for yourself. So I, ever since this happened, viewed it as significant, even when I wasn't really associating it with the second coming necessarily. I was just out of the army. We had moved back to Phoenix, and there was just something about it that just really caught my attention. I watched it with my really nice welding mask, and it was really neat. And then afterwards, realizing that it went over those locations, that blew me away. But what blew me away even more was looking forward to 2024. And this is the one that's going to happen in just a couple months. It's going to go over Fayette, New York, the first headquarters of the church, the Sacred Grove. It's going to go over Hiram, Ohio, the third headquarters of the church, and Kirtland, Ohio, the second headquarters of the church. So I find that very unlikely. And these two eclipses are spaced by about 7 years. That's very interesting. Now, what I don't have on here is the eclipse that happened last year in October that went through Utah. That's the one that it goes through. I'll just do it again in case there's new people. Pull up my Google Earth. While that's pulling up, I just want to verify for you in case you doubt these headquarters of the church. So there's this article again. It's in the August 2001 Ensign, from New York to Utah, 7 church headquarters. And I just want to show you, this is why I do the screen sharing and take you to the actual source of whatever I'm sharing, so that you know I'm not just making things up. So we have Fayette, New York, and then you have Kirtland, Ohio, the first period, Hiram, Ohio after that, Kirtland, Ohio again, but the second period, Far West, Missouri, Nauvoo, Illinois, Winter Quarters, Nebraska, and finally Salt Lake City, Utah. Okay, Google Earth. Let me turn this off. And by the way, I'm thinking about scrapping this whole thing of like trying to track all these disasters. It's hard. There are a lot of things going on, and I can't keep up with it. I may just have to stick to like big things that happen. I've been trying to like keep track of all these what seem to be pretty extreme events like flooding and stuff, but there's just so many of them. I don't think I can keep up with it anymore. Anyway, here's Utah. This is the one that happened in October. It happened 7 days. Okay, this is how it went. We had General Conference on September 30th and October 1st. The Sunday sessions was on October 1st. 7 days after that is when the war in Israel started on October 7th. And then 7 days after that, on October 14th, that's when you had this eclipse that went through Utah. And as you'll notice, all these place markers represent a temple in Utah. Well, these are all the temples of the church, and we're looking at Utah. And there's only one temple that was in operation at the time of this eclipse. It was the Monticello, Utah temple down here in the southeast corner of the state. You'll notice this one. This is the Manti temple, but it's currently decommissioned for renovations. Okay. So this eclipse took what I feel like is an unlikely path, which missed as many temples as possible. I don't know what that means. It happened, and it's unlikely. So that's why I'm taking note of it. Okay, so back here. So we had 2017, and then we had 2023, and now we have this one coming up in just a few months. That's also going to go over the Sacred Grove, just like the one 4 months after President Nelson was born. Okay, so if we're thinking just about the Sacred Grove in Palmyra, it had one in 1925, 4 months after President Nelson was born, one in 1994, but this one was an annual, excuse me, this one was an annular eclipse. And we're going to come back to this because you'll notice all these different places that this eclipse went over. So I wanted to know what was going on in 1994. It turns out some significant things were happening at that time. So we'll get back to that. And now we have only the second total eclipse going over the Sacred Grove since the year 1900. So it's beyond coincidence, you guys. It's beyond coincidence. How is it that these eclipses seem to match up with President Nelson's life and his presidency? How is it that they go over all these different these locations? They like connect them. I mean, some of them you understand why. Kirtland and Hiram, Ohio are pretty close to each other, but not so much Palmyra. Fayette is kind of near Palmyra, sort of. So some of them are close together, but still, there's just like I said, this thing with Independence and Far West and Adam-on-Diamond from 1900 until 2199. This is the only time that this happens. What happened in 2017? This is the only time. So there's a lot of very unlikely things that are going on with these eclipses. So let's move on. I'll just show you what's coming up in the future. August 12th of 2045, that's when there's going to be an eclipse over Salt Lake. This is the first one over Salt Lake, starting in the year 1900. Winter Quarters is going to have one a few years later on June 11th, but it's going to be an annular eclipse. That's going to be in the year 2048. And then you have a pretty, like a big space from that until the next one. The next one is going to be back to Salt Lake. It'll be an annular eclipse. Interestingly, it's going to be happening in the year 2077. So you got 2 sevens there. And then 2 years later, in 2079, there's going to be a total solar eclipse over New York City, the first one since 1925. And then there's going to be another one over Salt Lake in 2084, July 2nd. 2093, we're going to have another one. It's going to go over Fayette, New York. Fayette, New York, first headquarters of the church. Kirtland, Ohio, second headquarters of the church. And Hiram, Ohio, third headquarters of the church. But it will not go over the Sacred Grove. It'll just go over the first 3 headquarters of the church. And then in 2111, there's going to be an annular solar eclipse that goes over Washington, D.C., Kirtland, and Hiram. In 2136, there's going to be one that goes over Rome. So during this entire time, Rome has not had one going back to the year 1900. This will be the first one, and it's only an annular solar eclipse, April 1st, 2136. Here's another one for New York City in 2144. It will also be a total solar eclipse. In 2154, there's going to be one that goes over Independence and Far West, but it will not go over Adam-on-Diamond. And it will also include Washington, D.C. 2169, another one over Salt Lake. This one will be a total solar eclipse. In 2178, there's a total solar eclipse that'll go over Winter Quarters and Nauvoo. in 2187, another one that goes over Rome, and then that's it. So this is everything that I'm able to get from timeanddate.com. And so you can see for these cities, it's not like they're having eclipses every day. And there's this big space between the Jerusalem eclipse until you get to 1994. And that's the only eclipse that goes over Jerusalem, the one back in 1933. I thought that was kind of interesting. So, if you were just to, again, if we do this kind of like little exercise, if you were to give this to somebody from the past, somebody like in the 1800s, they might be interested in whatever is going on between 1994 and 2024, because there's like this concentration, or there's like an uptick in eclipses taking place at this time. Just kind of like just visually glancing at it, just you can see, wow, there's a lot going on in this time frame. And then as you continue on, there's just kind of like sporadic eclipses, but nothing like what you see right here, 1994 to 2004. There's nothing like it from the year 1900 until the year 2199. There is not another time like what we're experiencing right now. So that's kind of exciting. So let's go ahead and let's look at the year 1994 and what was going on then, and how may it relate to what's going on right now. I'll show you. Okay. So thankfully, Church News has like these articles. I'm sure they probably have one for, I wouldn't be surprised if they have one for every year. I don't know how far back it would go, but where they do these like recaps of what happened that year. So this is for 1994. New church president sustained. 2,000th stake created. And that's not all. Okay. Now, right off the bat, okay, new church president sustained. We've already made mention of the fact in other videos that this eclipse that happened in 2017, it came at a time of transition. The transition between President Monson and President Nelson. Okay. 2017 was President Monson's last full year as president of the church. He died in early January of 2018. And then President Nelson officially became president on January 14th of 2018. So I had taken note of the fact that this eclipse seems to, maybe go along with that transition from one president of the church to another, right? Now we're talking about 1994, and this eclipse seems to go along with this one. What was the transition? Okay, it says one chapter closed and another opened in the history of the church during 1994 with the death of President Ezra Taft Benson and subsequent call of President Howard W. Hunter to be the 14th, that's 2 sevens, president of the church. He began his presidency by issuing 2 invitations to the members of the church. See June 5th below. Okay, so that really interested me because I've put together this spreadsheet. It's a phrase tracker. This comes from General Conference talks as well as the Journal of Discourses. I went ahead and I made a space right here because everything above row 28, this all comes from the Scripture Citation Index, which has all the General Conference talks going back to 1942. But before 1942, the only thing that the Scripture Citation Index has is the Journal of Discourses and then the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith. So it's not really comparing apples to apples. Okay, so I don't really know if I'm going to be able to, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to ever unless BYU decides to add those previous conference reports all the way back as far as they go, it's probably just going to be like this. But if we look at George Albert Smith until President Nelson, you'll notice that it's President Nelson and President Benson who have talked the most about the second coming. This includes all of their talks from the time that they first started giving talks in General Conference until their very last talk, or their most recent talk. So this is a tally of the number of talks that include these different words and phrases. So second coming has been used so far in 22 of President Nelson's talks. In Ezra Taft Benson, 21. And nobody else even comes close to that from George Albert Smith until President Nelson. No one comes close. And then you have all these other phrases and words and terms. And I total it all up over here in column I. And you can see that Ezra Taft Benson and President Nelson, they stand way out when it comes to second coming words and phrases. So, now we have another kind of connection of some sort between the two of them, where there's this transition, and the transition involves an eclipse that takes place that same year, or within months of the transition. So it's just kind of weird. Okay, I highlighted some of the things that stuck out to me in this article. January, a year-long commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the church's Genealogical Society of Utah, now the Family History Department, commenced. So that happened. January 1st, the first presidency endorsed the designation by the United Nations of 1994 as the International Year of the Family. And it was the next year that the Family, A Proclamation to the World, came out. January 22nd, ground was broken for the Hong Kong Temple by Elder John K. Carmack of the 70, who is president of the Asia area. So that was pretty significant. Our first temple in China. February 19th, the first presidency issued a statement opposing efforts to legalize same-gender marriages. That was way back before things really took off with that. In fact, on my spreadsheet called Timeline Second Coming, I've kind of been keeping track of the different countries that have legalized same-sex marriage. So, for example, here's one. October 1st, Germany legalizes same-sex marriage. They were the 22nd nation to do so. Let's see. The first one, there's Spain, unfortunately. The first one was the Netherlands, April 1st, 2001. So that's as far back as it goes as far as I know, based on my research. Netherlands, and then a while later, Belgium in 2003, Spain in 2005, and Canada that same month, right? So 1994 was well before this. I didn't know that they were even really thinking or talking about this back then, but I guess 2001 isn't that far away from 1994. Anyway, let's go back to, where is it? Let's go back to this. April 2nd, presiding Bishop Robert D. Hales was sustained in General Conference to fill the vacancy in the Council of the 12, created by the death of Elder Marvin J. Ashton. So I'm sure a lot of us remember Elder Robert D. Hales. He was in the Quorum of the 12. And he joined the Quorum in 1994. May 30th, President Ezra Taft Benson, 94, president of the church for 8.5 years, died of congestive heart failure at his apartment in Salt Lake City. He was eulogized at funeral services June 4th for his great contributions to mankind. Well, and then it wasn't just that. The day after he died, so notice this is May 30th, 1994. The day after he died, there was an unusual event that took place, unusual for this part of the country, the Intermountain West. It was the May 31st, 1994 DERECHO. And a derecho is essentially really strong, like hurricane force winds that go across I can't remember the definition, but it's like straight line winds for X number of miles at a certain speed. That's a derecho. And that's what happened. It went right over northern Utah. It was basically centered on Salt Lake City. Here's Salt Lake City, like right about here. And the derecho blew through there. And it was unusual. I'm not going to go over all the details of this, but I have before, and I'm going to be doing a playlist called Church Specific Signs. That's one of my projects that I want to work on, and I'll go over this again. But if I remember right, here's the animation of it. So you just see it go just boom right up through there. This happened the day after he died. And in the same year that he died, there was this eclipse. Very odd. Let's go back to it. Where is it? The same month that he died. This is May 10th that the eclipse happened. And he died 20 days later. And then the day after he died, there was a very unusual derecho that went through Utah and up into Wyoming. You can't tell me that that's coincidence. You just can't. All right. June 5th, President Howard W. Hunter was ordained and set apart as the church's 14th president. And these were his two invitations to members. Live with ever more attention to the life and example of the Lord Jesus Christ, and to establish the temple of the Lord as the great symbol of their membership in the supernal setting for their most sacred covenants. Okay, now look at this. June 23rd, Elder Jeffrey R. Holland. And I still feel like he kind of like stands out. He's always stood out to me. But in addition to just how I've always felt about him, in doing this channel, I've learned how much of a connection he has with the Middle East and with Israel. He was instrumental in getting the BYU Jerusalem Center to be constructed. And we had this recent anecdote from Elder Renlin, who knows what it looks like when somebody's on their way out, like when they're on their deathbed. You'll remember that President Holland was hospitalized. Elder Renlin went, and then he was like, oh, he's not going to make it. That's what he was thinking. But then just miraculously, like the next day or something like that, I can't remember all the details, but there's an article about it that you can read. He went there like the next day, and President Holland was perfectly fine. He was like recovered. He was like up and walking around and eating food. And so Elder Renlin said that the Lord definitely wants him here for some reason, because from his experience, President Holland should have died. At the time, he was not yet president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, but that would happen just a little bit later after that. So I have my eyes on President Jeffrey R. Holland. But this is another thing that happened in the year of that eclipse. Again, what eclipse? Just because, in case we forgot, the eclipse that went over Fayette, the first headquarters of the church, the Sacred Grove, Kirtland, the second headquarters of the church, Hiram, Ohio, the third headquarters of the church, and Independence. Blah. Why can't I talk during this? Independence, Missouri, the future headquarters, one of two world capitals of the world, and it's going to be the future headquarters of the church. It'll be the center place. Okay, what else? June 26th, President Howard W. Hunter, President Gordon B. Hinckley, and Elder Russell Ballard spoke at 3 separate commemorative events in Nauvoo in Carthage, Illinois, on the 150th anniversary of the martyrdom of the prophet Joseph Smith. So there was an eclipse that went over those locations, not Nauvoo, but it went over all those significant church sites on the in the year of the 150th anniversary of his martyrdom. That's interesting. The prophet and his brother Hiram were killed while incarcerated in Carthage jail, June 27th, 1844. Okay, that actually may be it. Oh, one more at the very end. December 11th, the 2000th stake in the church was created in Mexico City, Mexico, with President Howard W. Hunter presiding. So 1994 was a year of transition from one president of the church to the next. We got 2 new apostles in that year, Elder Robert D. Hales and Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, who is now president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And excuse me. And, some of these other things that were going on. Now I made another spreadsheet that kind of simplifies the eclipses to this. This is just another way to visualize it. So I just put them in order, just like this, consolidated it all into just 2 columns. And so again, the birth of President Nelson, September 9th, 1924. 4 months later, you have this eclipse that went over the Sacred Grove, New York City, and Fayette, New York. Okay. The next one that we have after that, Jerusalem in 1933. And then the next one after that is 1994, what we were just talking about. Fayette, Palmyra, Hiram, Kirtland, Independence. So that takes place 20 days later. President Ezra Taft Benson passes away. The day after that, there's the Utah-Wyoming derecho. President Howard W. Hunter becomes president, but he's only president for about 9 months, and he passes away the next year. And then we have President Gordon B. Hinckley. So this was like going from one president to the next really quickly because President Hunter's presidency was so short. So you could also view it as the transition from Ezra Taft Benson to Gordon B. Hinckley. And President Hinckley did a lot during his presidency. He was the first one that really, really started building all these temples, like in big numbers. The idea for small temples, a lot of people give him credit for that. And Elder Bednar, in a talk that he was or like a devotional type thing that he was doing with CES personnel, he pointed out that it was actually Spencer W. Kimball that started making smaller temples. But what President Hinckley did is he applied that principle, made them smaller, and just built many, many more of them. And he's the one that got the church above 100 temples. So there were a lot of things that happened during his presidency. There was a lot that happened then. Anyway, moving on. And then you skip forward all the way to 2012, the St. George annular eclipse. And then 2017, Independence, Far West, Adirondack. And now the one that's coming up on April 8th, Fayette, Sacred Grove, Hiram, Kirtland. So there you go. From 1900 until now. I wish I could go back even further, but I don't know that it's necessary because we've gone forward quite a ways, all the way till 2199, and this is just unusual what's happening. 1994 to 2024. It's I would say, as we're looking at these specific cities, it's an anomaly. Something is happening here. And I feel like you can tell that just by listening to President Nelson. So anyway, you can come here and view this yourself. I'm not going to go any further at this point. I'm not really too interested in, the future, like beyond 2024. if we end up getting to that point, then I'll get more excited and interested about it. But the next big eclipse to look forward to when it comes to these cities and locations is Salt Lake City in 2045. So, but I'm not even looking that far in the future. So you may be, but I'm not. But you can view these spreadsheets anytime. The link is in the description box below. Okay. Right now, as I'm making this video, there are 4 people that are viewing the spreadsheets. So you can copy anything that I have on here and copy it onto your own documents and add it to your study. But just be aware that I have these 2 Eclipse spreadsheets. I have signs. It's called Signs Eclipses 1, Signs Eclipses 2. Just so that you can have those 2 views. Okay. So interesting stuff, and I think just more reason to be excited about this period of time that we're in right now, and even this year itself. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.